Adrian Kane sat frozen in his leather chair, staring at the woman standing 3 feet away from him. She was trembling, holding something small and dark between her fingers. He could feel his own heartbeat pounding against his ribs, but now he could hear it too. For the first time in 37 years, sound flooded his world like a broken dam. His breath came sharp and fast. The clock on the wall ticked like thunder. The woman's tears hit the floor with soft, impossible clarity. She whispered something he still couldn't fully understand, but her face told him everything. Someone had stolen his hearing on purpose. Someone had kept him deaf his entire life. And the person responsible wasn't his enemy. What happened next would destroy everything he thought he knew. Before we dive into this story, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Now let's begin. Adrian Kane owned Northbridge, not officially, not on paper, but every judge who signed a verdict, every dock worker who loaded unmarked cargo, every business owner who paid protection money, they all knew the truth. Adrian controlled the money, the territory, and the fear. For 28 years, his empire had grown in silence, literal silence. Adrian Kane was born deaf. No doctor had ever been able to fix it. No surgery, no hearing aid, no miracle treatment. He lived in a world without sound. No voices, no music, no warnings whispered in back alleys, no gunshots, no screams. He read lips with ruthless precision. He felt vibrations through tables and floors. He watched faces the way hunters watched prey. People thought his silence made him weak when he was young. They learned fast how wrong they were. His mansion sat on a hill overlooking the harbor, 32 rooms, marble floors, armed guards at every entrance. Security cameras tracked every hallway. Adrian's office occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows gave him a view of the city that belonged to him. Behind his mahogany desk, he ran an empire built on shipping fraud, gambling dens, and construction rackets. He did it all without hearing a single word. The staff moved through his home like ghosts. They understood the rules without being told. No sudden movements, no unnecessary noise, no looking Adrian in the eye unless he allowed it. He preferred his world to be controlled, predictable, manageable. That Tuesday morning, Alina Reyes arrived for her first day as a housekeeper. She was 32, recently widowed, hired through a referral from Northbridge Community Services. The head butler, Mr. Garrett, walked her through the mansion slowly. His instructions were clear. Start in the guest quarters, work through the dining hall, save the master's study for last. Never interrupt Mr. Kane, never ask questions, never assume anything. Alina nodded quietly. She had worked for wealthy families before, but this place felt different, heavier, like the walls carried secrets no one dared speak aloud. Adrian noticed her the moment she entered his study that afternoon. Not because she was nervous, though her shoulders were tense. Not because she seemed afraid, though fear lived in this house like furniture. He noticed her because she moved with purpose. She cleaned systematically. The bookshelf, the crystal decanters, the ivory chess set that had never been used. Her hands were careful, respectful. Alina approached the window ledge near his desk to dust. Adrian kept reading his financial reports. He didn't look up, but he tracked her movement in his peripheral vision. She worked quietly, exactly how he preferred. Then she stopped. Her hand froze mid-motion. The cleaning cloth hung suspended in the air. Adrian glanced up. Alina was staring directly at him, not at his face, in his ear. Her expression wasn't fear, it was something else. Concern, confusion, shock. She took a step closer, then another. Her eyes stayed locked on the right side of his head. No one stared at Adrian like this. No one examined him as if he were a problem to be solved. His jaw tightened. His hand moved toward the desk drawer where he kept his pistol. But Alina wasn't threatening him. She raised one trembling hand and pointed toward his ear. Her lips moved. He couldn't hear the words, but he felt them in the air between them. She stepped closer still. Her hand hovered inches from his face. Adrian's instincts screamed at him to pull away, to reassert control, to remind this woman who she was dealing with. but something deeper held him still. Alina's fingers moved with surgical precision. Gentle, careful, she reached into his ear canal. Adrian felt pressure, movement, something shifting deep inside his head. Then resistance gave way. She pulled something small and dark from his ear. She held it in her palm, staring at it like it was a weapon. The rush hit Adrian like a freight train. Air moved through passages that had been blocked since childhood. Pressure Alized in ways his body had forgotten, and then he heard it, his own breathing, ragged and desperate. The sound filled the room. His hands flew to his head. His mouth opened, but no words came. How could there be words for something this impossible? But that was only the beginning. The clock in the corner ticked like a hammer against stone. Alina stepped backward and her shoes clicked against the marble floor. The sound made Adrian flinch. Outside, the city hummed with traffic, car horns, construction equipment, voices shouting in the distance. Alina watched him with tears streaming down her face. She understood what this moment meant. Adrian tried to speak, to thank her, to ask what she had done, but his voice came out broken and raw. He sank back into his chair, overwhelmed. This woman, this stranger, had fixed what 28 years of specialists had called impossible. But as the shock faded, a new realization crept in. If Alina could see what doctors had missed, then someone had been lying to him. Someone had kept him deaf on purpose. And Adrian Kane didn't forgive lies. Adrian's hands shook as he pressed them against his desk. Every sound crashed into him like a wave. The hum of the air conditioning, the rustle of his own suit fabric, the ticking clock that wouldn't stop. His brain struggled to process input it had never learned to handle. Alina stood frozen by the window, still holding the small, waxy mass in her palm. It looked like compacted earwax mixed with dried cotton fibers. Adrian forced himself to focus. He had been seeing Dr. Raymond Holloway since he was 9 years old. Holloway was Northbridge's most expensive ear, nose, and throat specialist, a man with a pristine reputation, a man Adrian's uncle had personally recommended, and Holloway had diagnosed Adrian the same way every single time. Irreversible congenital nerve damage. Nothing could be done. Accept it and move forward. Yet this woman, a housekeeper with no medical degree, had fixed him in 30 seconds. Adrian grabbed his phone from the desk. Hearing the electronic hum for the first time disoriented him. He dialed Holloway's private number. As the phone rang, Adrian experienced something completely foreign, the actual sound of a phone call. Each ring echoed through the speaker into his newly awakened ear. When Holloway answered, Adrian nearly dropped the phone. A human voice, real, textured, carrying emotion that lip-reading had never conveyed. Holloway sounded older than Adrian remembered, tired, maybe nervous. Adrian's own voice came out stronger now. He demanded an immediate appointment, not a request, a command. Holloway agreed without hesitation, the way he always did when the Kane family called. Adrian ended the call and turned back to Alina. She hadn't moved. Her face showed concern mixed with growing fear. She had worked for powerful families before, but none like this. The stories whispered in the old neighborhood painted Adrian Kane as someone who settled debts permanently. Adrian stood slowly. His footsteps echoed against the marble floor like gunshots. Each step announced his presence in ways that had been impossible before. He stopped directly in front of Alina, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. For a long moment they simply stared at each other. Then Adrian spoke. His voice carried a gentleness that surprised them both. He thanked her. 2 simple words that carried the weight of a lifetime's gratitude. Alina's eyes filled with fresh tears, but beneath her relief, Adrian detected something else. Knowledge. She knew something he didn't. Within 2 hours, Adrian sat in Holloway's sterile office on Crescent Medical Plaza. The clinic hummed with sounds he had never experienced. Footsteps in the hallway, equipment beeping in examination rooms, hushed conversations between nurses. The receptionist's pen clicked nervously against her desk when she saw him enter. Dr. Holloway emerged from his private office. Silver hair is perfectly styled, expensive suit tailored to hide a growing paunch, gold-rimmed glasses that reflected the overhead lighting. But now Adrian could hear the doctor's approach. The confident stride sounded hollow, artificial, like an actor playing a role he had rehearsed too many times. They shook hands. Adrian heard the slight tremor in Holloway's breathing, the way his voice carried nervousness despite his practiced bedside manner. In the examination room, Holloway gestured toward the chair with practiced authority. Adrian sat. The doctor prepared his instruments. The otoscope clicked as it was assembled. The light buzzed to life. Holloway approached and peered into Adrian's right ear. His breathing was steady but faster than normal. Adrian could hear everything now. The doctor's quiet gasp of surprise, the sharp intake of breath that suggested discovery, the moment when professional composure cracked. Holloway stepped back. His face had gone pale. His hands trembled as he set down the otoscope. The instrument clattered against the metal tray with more noise than necessary. Silence filled the room, not the comfortable silence Adrian had known his entire life. This was heavy, oppressive, the kind of quiet that comes before devastating revelations. When Holloway finally spoke, his voice carried defeat. The blockage was gone, completely removed. After decades of examinations, the obstruction that had stolen Adrian's hearing had vanished as if it had never existed. Adrian leaned forward slowly. His voice remained calm, controlled, almost conversational, but beneath that civilized surface lay the promise of consequences that made the doctor's face drain of all remaining color. Adrian asked one question: "Who paid you to keep me deaf?" Holloway's silence was answer enough. The tremor in his voice when he finally tried to respond told Adrian everything. This wasn't incompetence. This was a conspiracy. Before Adrian could press further, his phone buzzed, an encrypted message from Marcus Stone, his security chief. Adrian read it twice. His chest tightened. "Alina Reyes isn't who she says she is. Check her real background. You're not going to like what you find." Adrian left Holloway's office without another word. The doctor understood what silence meant from Adrian Kane. It meant reckoning was coming. It meant time was running out. Marcus had the full report ready by the time Adrian returned to the mansion. Alina Reyes wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a former trauma nurse who lost her medical license 3 years ago after exposing a hospital kickback scheme involving unnecessary surgeries. She had been blacklisted, bankrupt, desperate for work. Her widowed backstory was real but incomplete. Her real motive for getting close to Adrian remained unclear, and that made her dangerous. Adrian found her in the mansion's library that evening. She was dusting the shelves, moving with the same careful precision he had noticed earlier. When she saw him enter, she straightened. Her hands stilled. She knew this conversation was coming. Adrian didn't waste time. He told her exactly what his security team had uncovered. Alina didn't deny anything. She met his eyes directly, something few people dared to do. She admitted she took the job because she needed money. She had been blacklisted from legitimate nursing work. She had bills to pay and nowhere else to turn. But she swore she had no agenda beyond survival. When she saw the blockage in his ear, her medical instincts took over. She couldn't ignore it. She couldn't leave him suffering when she could help. Adrian studied her face. He wanted to believe her, but he didn't believe in coincidences. He told Marcus to dig deeper. The investigation revealed something that made Adrian's blood run cold. Alina's late husband, David Reyes, had been a forensic accountant. He died in a car accident 4 years ago, right after he had been subpoenaed to testify against Kane Logistics, one of Adrian's shipping front companies. David had discovered evidence of millions in laundered money. The accident had never been investigated thoroughly. Adrian hadn't ordered the hit himself. He had delegated it to his then second-in-command, Victor Lang. But Victor died of a heart attack 2 years ago, taking the details of that operation to his grave. Now Alina, David's widow, was standing in Adrian's home. She had just restored his hearing. She had access to his private study. She knew his routines. Coincidence or revenge? Adrian confronted her again, this time in his office. The door locked, Marcus standing guard outside. Alina's face hardened when Adrian laid out the connection. She didn't cry, didn't beg, she admitted the truth. She had taken the job hoping to find evidence that Adrian ordered her husband's death. She wanted answers. She wanted justice. But she swore the ear blockage discovery was genuine. She wasn't a killer. She was just a widow seeking the truth. Adrian's jaw tightened. Every instinct told him to eliminate the threat, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she looked at him without fear. Maybe it was the sound of her voice, steady and honest, the first voice he had ever truly heard. Maybe it was the fact that she had given him something no one else could. Before Adrian could decide, the front gate intercom buzzed. Marcus's voice came through sharp and urgent. Dr. Holloway had arrived unannounced. He was panicking, bleeding from a head wound, demanding to see Adrian immediately. Adrian told Marcus to bring him up. 2 minutes later, Holloway stumbled into the office, clutching his bleeding temple. His expensive suit was torn. His face was ashen. He gasped for breath. Alina moved to help him, her nursing instincts taking over, but Adrian held up his hand. He wanted to hear what Holloway had to say first. The doctor's voice cracked as he spoke. "They're coming for you. The people who paid me weren't working alone. They wanted you deaf for a RIA. Son, and now that you can hear, you're a dead man." Holloway collapsed before he could say more. Alina caught him before he hit the floor. Adrian stood frozen, processing what he had just heard. Someone had kept him deaf deliberately. Someone who didn't want him to hear. Someone who benefited from his disability. And whoever they were coming to finish what they started. Marcus helped carry Holloway to the mansion's secure medical room. Alina worked quickly, cleaning the head wound and checking his vitals. The doctor drifted in and out of consciousness. His breathing was shallow. His skin was cold and clammy. Adrian stood against the wall, arms crossed, listening to every sound in the room. The medical equipment beeping. Alina's steady breathing as she worked. The rustle of bandages. Even Holloway's labored breaths told a story Adrian was only beginning to understand. After 20 minutes, Holloway's eyes fluttered open. He looked around the room in confusion before his gaze settled on Adrian. Fear flooded his face. Not the fear of a victim. The fear of a man whose lies had finally caught up with him. Adrian moved closer. His voice was quiet but heavy with threat. "Start talking." Holloway's confession came in broken segments, interrupted by gasps and trembling silences. He had been paid $50,000 annually for 28 years, not by a rival gang, not by a business competitor, by Adrian's own uncle, Thomas Kane. Adrian's entire body went rigid. Thomas Kane was his father's brother, the man who raised him after his parents died in a house fire when Adrian was 8 years old. Thomas was a respected Northbridge city councilman, beloved by the public, known for his charity work. The man Adrian trusted more than anyone in the world. Holloway continued. When Adrian was 9, Thomas brought him to Holloway's office. Thomas instructed the doctor to ensure Adrian remained deaf no matter what. Holloway was told the blockage was easily removable, but keeping Adrian disabled served a greater purpose. Adrian's fists clenched. What purpose? Holloway swallowed hard. Thomas needed Adrian vulnerable, isolated, dependent. Thomas had been embezzling millions from the Kane family's legitimate business holdings since Adrian's father died. If Adrian ever gained full awareness of his surroundings, if he could hear the whispered conversations, the phone calls, the backroom deals, he would discover the theft. But Thomas made a miscalculation. Adrian's deafness didn't make him weak. It made him ruthless. He built a criminal empire because of his disability, compensating with hyper-awareness and strategic brilliance. Thomas couldn't stop him, so he adapted. He stayed close, played the supportive uncle, continued bleeding the family's wealth while Adrian focused on the underworld. Now, with Adrian's hearing restored, Thomas knew his secret was at risk. According to Holloway, Thomas had hired a team of mercenaries, former military contractors. They were coming to eliminate Adrian and make it look like a gang war casualty. Tonight, Adrian's mind raced. Every memory of his uncle now carried new weight. Every conversation, every piece of advice, every moment of supposed support, all of it was manipulation. All of it was control. Alina stepped forward from the corner where she had been listening. Her face was pale but determined. "There's more you need to know." Adrian turned to her. His newly awakened hearing caught the tremor in her voice, the courage it took to speak. Alina revealed her final secret. She didn't just come to Adrian's mansion for revenge. 6 months ago, she intercepted an encrypted email between Thomas Kane and an offshore account linked to her husband's murder. David wasn't killed because of Adrian. He was killed because he discovered Thomas's embezzlement scheme. Thomas used Adrian's organization as cover for his own crimes. Then he eliminated anyone who got too close to the truth. Adrian stared at her. For the first time in his life, he heard truth spoken aloud by someone with nothing left to lose. Alina had come to save him, not destroy him. Before Adrian could respond, the mansion's power cut out. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in red. Marcus burst through the door, his face grim. 8 armed intruders breached the south perimeter. They're not here to negotiate. Adrian's security team had already engaged. The sound of gunfire echoed through the mansion. Adrian heard it all, the sharp crack of rifles, the heavy thud of footsteps on marble, the shouts of men fighting for their lives. Adrian grabbed Alina's arm. "We're leaving now." Marcus led them through a hidden passage behind a false wall panel. Holloway stumbled behind them, still weak but moving. The tunnel stretched beneath the estate for nearly half a mile, ending at a safe house in the Bridgeport Industrial District. Behind them, the firefight intensified. Adrian heard glass shattering, doors splintering, his men were shouting commands. The sensory overload was overwhelming, but his instincts took over. He had spent 28 years building power. He wouldn't let his uncle take it away. They reached the safe house just before dawn. Marcus immediately locked down the building and activated counter-surveillance measures. Adrian paced the small room, his mind calculating every angle. Marcus produced a series of audio recordings he had been secretly making for the past 5 years. Conversations with Thomas Kane that Adrian never knew existed. Thomas had been using Adrian's name to authorize illegal deals, skim profits, eliminate witnesses. Adrian had been a puppet. His deafness was the perfect cover for Thomas's manipulation. Adrian listened to every recording. He heard his uncle's voice for the first time, smooth, charming, utterly false. Every word was poison disguised as concern. Alina sat beside him. She finally admitted the full truth. She didn't just want revenge. She wanted to save Adrian from the same fate as her husband. She had been investigating Thomas for years, but no one would believe a disgraced nurse over a city councilman. Getting hired at the mansion was her last desperate move to find proof. Adrian turned to her. His voice was quiet but steady. "Thank you." 2 simple words, but they carried everything. Marcus's phone rang. He answered, listened, then hung up. His face was dark. The mercenaries retreated, but Thomas has gone public. He's holding a press conference right now. He's claiming you're a violent crime lord who threatened his life. He's framing you for everything, including David Reyes's murder. Adrian realized the truth. His uncle wasn't just trying to kill him, he was destroying him. And if Adrian didn't act fast, he would lose everything. Not to bullets, but to lie. Adrian stood at the window of the safe house, watching the city wake up. The sun rose over Northbridge, painting the harbor in shades of gold and red. For the first time in his life, he could hear the city's morning sounds, the distant hum of traffic, the call of seagulls over the water, the low rumble of ships leaving port. It was beautiful, and it had been stolen from him. Marcus handed him a tablet showing the live press conference. Thomas Kane stood behind a podium, surrounded by reporters. His face was grave, concerned, the perfect mask of a public servant forced to expose a dangerous criminal. Thomas claimed Adrian had been running a violent criminal empire for decades. He said Adrian had threatened his life when Thomas tried to intervene. He presented fabricated evidence linking Adrian to David Reyes's murder, to drug trafficking, to corruption that reached every level of Northbridge's government. The performance was flawless. Thomas had spent 28 years perfecting his act. But Adrian had something Thomas didn't expect. He had the truth, and for the first time in his life he could hear it. Adrian didn't respond with violence. He didn't send his men after his uncle. He didn't burn Thomas's house to the ground the way every instinct screamed at him to do. Instead, Adrian listened. He gathered every audio recording Marcus had made, every witness statement Alina had collected during her investigation, every piece of financial evidence showing the embezzlement. Holloway agreed to testify in exchange for protection. Adrian arranged a meeting with District Attorney Rachel Cho. She was one of the few honest officials left in Northbridge, a woman who had refused bribes and threats for 15 years, a woman Adrian had secretly protected more than once because her integrity served his interests. He presented her with everything: the recordings, the financial records, Holloway's testimony, Alina's forensic analysis. Rachel listened to it all. When Adrian finished, she looked at him with something he had never seen directed at him before: respect. "This will destroy him," she said quietly. "I know," Adrian replied. Within 48 hours, Thomas Kane was arrested. The charges included embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and fraud. The empire he built in the shadows of Adrian's reputation collapsed overnight. The media called it the biggest political scandal in Northbridge history. They didn't know half of it. Adrian stepped back from his criminal operations, not out of morality, out of pragmatism. He had heard enough to know that power built on deception was fragile. He began transitioning his assets into legitimate businesses, using his wealth to rebuild what Thomas had destroyed. Alina stayed, not as a housekeeper, as Adrian's head of security and finance. She was the only person he trusted to hear the truth. 6 months later, Adrian stood in a small cemetery on the outskirts of Northbridge. The sun filtered through the trees. Birds sang in the branches overhead. A light breeze rustled the leaves. Alina stood beside him at David Reyes's grave. She placed fresh flowers on the headstone, her hand. S were steady now. The trembling fear that had defined her for years was gone. Adrian heard her quiet tears, the wind through the trees, the distant sound of children playing in a park somewhere beyond the cemetery walls. For the first time in his life, he understood that silence was never his strength. It was his prison. Alina turned to him. "Thank you for coming." "He deserved justice," Adrian said. "You both did." They walked back toward the car slowly. Alina talked about her plans to reopen her nursing practice. Adrian listened, really listened, not just to the words but to the hope in her voice, the healing that was finally possible. As they reached the cemetery gates, Adrian's phone buzzed, an encrypted message from an unknown sender. He opened it. His blood went cold. The message read, "Your uncle wasn't working alone. The real architect of your deafness is still out there, and they've been watching you since the day your parents died." Adrian stopped walking. Alina noticed immediately. "What is it?" He showed her the message. Her face went pale. They both stared at each other, the same realization hitting them simultaneously. The house fire that killed Adrian's parents when he was 8 years old. The convenient timing, the lack of investigation. The way Thomas had stepped in so quickly to take control of the family's assets. It wasn't an accident, it was murder, and whoever orchestrated it was still out there. Adrian looked at Alina. She met his eyes. They both understood. This wasn't over, it has only just begun.